Please comment where you are watching in the world. I had been texting with Mia for about a week, and while she came across as a little high energy, I chalked it up to nerves or excitement. She wasn't the type to hold back in messages. Lots of exclamation points, lots of LOLs, and a constant stream of memes that always seemed to arrive just as I was about to put my phone down. It was endearing in a way, though I wondered if she'd be the same in person. When I got to the bar, she was already there, sitting at a high-top table by the window. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose braid, and she was wearing a bright red dress that made her stand out in the dim, neon-lit room. She waved the second she saw me, her smile wide and a little too eager, like she'd been waiting for this moment all day. "Hey, you made it," she said as I walked over, her voice already cutting through the low hum of music and conversation. "Of course," I replied, sliding onto the stool across from her. I couldn't miss it. There were already 2 empty shot glasses in front of her, and she was holding a third, which she raised in a mock toast. "I figured I'd get started early," she said with a laugh. "But don't worry, I saved plenty for you." I laughed nervously, glancing at the bartender, who was already hovering nearby. I think I'll start with a beer, actually." Mia's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to notice. But then it was back, brighter than before. "Beer's fine," she said, her tone light but with a hint of something behind it. "But you're doing at least 1 shot with me. It's a rule." "A rule?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," she said, leaning forward, her elbows resting on the sticky surface of the table. "First dates should always start with a shot. Breaks the ice." I hesitated, but before I could say anything, she flagged down the bartender and ordered 2 more shots of tequila. She didn't ask what I liked, just assumed I'd go along with it. The bartender placed the glasses in front of us, and Mia grabbed hers immediately, holding it out to me. "To new friends," she said, her smile sharp and expectant. I didn't want to seem like a buzzkill, so I picked up the glass and tapped it against hers. "To new friends," I echoed, throwing the shot back. The tequila burned my throat, and I grimaced, setting the glass down quickly. "There you go," Mia said, clapping her hands like I'd just passed some kind of test. "See? That wasn't so bad." I laughed, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. "Yeah, not bad. But that was just the beginning." Before I even had a chance to order my beer, Mia was waving the bartender over again. Another round of shots appeared in front of us, and she slid one across the table to me. "Your turn," she said, her tone playful but firm. "You can't stop now." I hesitated, glancing down at the glass. "I don't know. I was kind of hoping to pace myself tonight." "Come on," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's just 1 more. Don't be boring." Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who kills the mood on a first date. So I picked up the glass and knocked it back, the burn sharper this time. Mia cheered, slamming her own glass down with a grin that was starting to look more manic than friendly. "Now we're talking," she said, leaning across the table. "You're fun, I like that." The night blurred after that. Mia seemed determined to keep the drinks coming, and every time I tried to slow down, she'd push another glass into my hand, her voice dripping with mockery if I hesitated. "What's the matter?" she'd say, her tone light but her eyes narrowing. "Can't keep up." At one point, I tried to switch to water, but she intercepted the bartender before he could bring it over. "He's fine," she said loudly, waving him off. "Just get us another round." I laughed nervously, trying to play it off, but inside, I was starting to feel trapped. The bar was getting louder, the neon lights flashing in time with the pounding music. My head was buzzing, not just from the alcohol, but from the growing sense that something was very wrong. Mia's demeanor had shifted, too. Her playful energy was tinged with something darker now, something aggressive. She wasn't just trying to have fun. She was testing me, pushing me like she was waiting to see how far she could go before I broke. Her hand brushed against mine at one point, her fingers lingering just a little too long. "You're not going to disappoint me, are you?" she said softly, her eyes locking onto mine. I hate being disappointed. The words sent a chill down my spine. I forced a smile, nodding quickly. "Of course not." "Good," she said, leaning back in her chair with a satisfied smirk. "Because I really hate quitters." The next shot tasted bitter, almost metallic, and I winced as it went down. My vision was starting to blur at the edges, and the room felt like it was spinning. Mia seemed unaffected, though. If anything, she was more energized, her laughter sharp and grating. "You're slowing down," she said, her tone teasing but with an edge of something colder. "Come on, 1 more. For me." "I think I'm done," I said, my voice slurring slightly. I've had enough. Her smile dropped, and for the first time that night, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Anger maybe? Disappointment? Whatever it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same sharp grin. Fine, she said, her tone light again. But you owe me next time. I nodded weakly, grateful for the reprieve. The bartender came over with the check, and I reached for my wallet, but Mia stopped me, her hand covering mine. Don't worry about it, she said, her smile softening. I've got this. I wanted to argue, but I didn't have the energy. My head was pounding, and all I wanted was to get out of there. Mia paid, and we stood to leave, her arm slipping around mine as we walked toward the door. The cold air outside was a shock to my system, and I took a deep breath, hoping it would clear my head. Mia was still clinging to me, her grip tighter than it needed to be. You okay? She asked, her voice dripping with fake concern. Yeah, I muttered. Just need some fresh air. She laughed, the sound echoing in the empty street. Lightweight, she teased, her fingers digging into my arm. You'll do better next time. I didn't respond. My stomach was churning, and all I could think about was getting home. Mia walked me to my car, her grip never loosening, her presence suffocating. When we reached the driver's side door, she leaned in close, her breath hot against my ear. Drive safe, she whispered, her voice low and mocking. Wouldn't want anything to happen to you. I froze, my hand hovering over the door handle. There was something in her tone, a hint of malice that sent a jolt of fear through me. I turned to look at her, but she was already walking away, her laughter ringing out in the night. I got in the car and locked the doors, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. The drive home was a blur, the streets dark and empty. When I finally made it inside, I collapsed onto the couch, my mind racing. I didn't know what I was expecting when I agreed to meet Claire at the park that evening. She'd suggested it after a few days of chatting online, saying something about how she preferred the quiet of nature over the chaos of the city. I liked that. It seemed different, grounded, maybe even refreshing. The park she chose wasn't one I'd been to before. It was tucked away on the edge of town, not the kind of place you'd stumble upon unless you were looking for it. When I arrived, the sun was just beginning to set, casting everything in this golden light that made the trees look almost alive. The air smelled earthy and damp, like it had rained earlier, even though the ground was dry. Claire was already there, waiting by the entrance. She was standing perfectly still, her back to me, staring into the trees like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. She didn't notice me at first, and I almost thought about calling out to her, but something about the way she stood, so calm, so deliberate, made me hesitate. Claire? I finally said, my voice breaking the stillness. She turned slowly, her dark hair spilling over her shoulders like water. She smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile you expect on a first date. It wasn't shy or nervous or even warm. It was knowing, like she'd been waiting for me for a long time. Hi, she said softly. Her voice was light, almost melodic. I'm glad you came. Yeah, of course, I said, trying not to sound as awkward as I felt. It's a nice evening for a walk. She didn't respond to that, just turned and started walking into the park. I followed her, unsure of what else to do. The path wound through clusters of massive, gnarled trees that must have been hundreds of years old. Their branches stretched overhead, forming a canopy that filtered the fading sunlight into these long, flickering shadows. It was beautiful, but in a way that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the sound of our footsteps crunching on the dirt path. Claire walked a few steps ahead of me, her hands brushing against the trees as she passed. She didn't say much, which made me feel self-conscious about filling the silence. I tried a couple of times, asked her how long she'd been coming to this park, mentioned how peaceful it was, but her answers were short, almost distracted, like she wasn't really listening. When we reached a small clearing surrounded by a cluster of particularly ancient oaks, she stopped abruptly. I nearly bumped into her. This is my favorite spot, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They've been here longer than anyone remembers. I nodded, even though she wasn't looking at me. It's nice. Quiet. She stepped closer to one of the trees, placing her hand against its rough bark. Her fingers moved slowly, tracing the grooves like she was reading a map. Then, without warning, she closed her eyes and began to whisper. At first, I thought she was talking to me, but when I leaned in to catch the words, I realized she wasn't. She was talking to the tree. I took a step back, unsure of what to do. What are you doing? She opened her eyes and turned to me, her expression serene. "They like to be spoken to," she said simply. "They remember everything, you know. Every secret, every sin." I laughed nervously, trying to brush off the chill her words sent down my spine. "Right. Trees with good memories. Makes sense." She didn't laugh. Instead, she reached out and took my hand, her grip cool and firm. "Do you want to hear them? Hear the trees?" I asked, blinking at her. "They don't speak to everyone," she said, taking a step closer to me. Her green eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. "But they might speak to you. If you listen." I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, to make some joke about tree whispering, but the way she was looking at me, so calm, so certain, made me hesitate. Against my better judgment, I nodded. She smiled, a slow, strange smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Come here." She led me to the largest tree in the clearing, its trunk so massive that it seemed to loom over us like a giant. The bark was dark and deeply grooved, almost like scars. She placed my hand against it, her own hand covering mine. "Close your eyes," she said softly. I hesitated, but decided to humor her. Closing my eyes, I focused on the rough texture of the bark beneath my palm. At first, I felt nothing, just the steady thrum of my own heartbeat. But then, there it was. A faint vibration, almost too subtle to notice. It pulsed beneath my hand, steady and rhythmic, like the tree itself was alive. The sensation grew stronger, spreading up my arm and into my chest, until it felt like the tree was breathing, pushing and pulling against my hand. Startled, I yanked my hand away. "What the hell was that?" Claire smiled again, tilting her head slightly. "They like you." "Okay," I said, taking a step back. "This has been interesting, but I think I should probably—" "They don't like everyone," she interrupted, her voice soft but firm. "Sometimes they reject people, and when that happens, they take something in return." I stared at her, my throat tightening. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer to me, her eyes searching mine. "You're lucky," she said finally. "They've accepted you. You're part of the forest now." I laughed nervously, trying to shake off the growing unease. "Right. Well, thanks for the experience. But I should really get going." I turned to leave, but Claire grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. "Don't go yet," she said, her voice almost pleading. "There's something I need to show you." Her grip was stronger than I expected, and for a moment, I considered pulling away. But the look in her eyes, intense, almost desperate, froze me in place. Reluctantly, I let her lead me deeper into the clearing, past the towering oaks, and into a dense cluster of trees. The air grew colder, the shadows darker. The ground beneath my feet felt softer, almost spongy, and the earthy smell grew stronger, nearly suffocating. My heart was pounding now, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, but Claire's grip on my arm was unrelenting. We stopped in front of a smaller tree, its bark pale and smooth like bone. Claire knelt down, brushing away the leaves at its base to reveal something half buried in the soil. A cluster of smooth, white objects. Bones. I stumbled backward, my stomach twisting. "What the hell is this?" "They remember everything," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every secret, every sin." I didn't wait for her to explain. I turned and ran, my feet slipping on the damp ground as I bolted back toward the path. But I didn't get far. Something wrapped around my ankle, yanking me off balance. I hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of me. Looking down, I saw a root curling up from the earth, tightening around my leg like a hand. I clawed at the ground, trying to pull myself free, but more roots emerged, snaking around my arms, my chest, dragging me down. Claire knelt beside me, her expression calm, almost tender. "Don't fight it," she said softly. "They've accepted you. You're part of the forest now." I screamed and ran. When she invited me over for dinner, I thought it was a good sign. I'd only known Maya for a couple of weeks. We'd met on a dating app, but our conversations had been easy, flowing naturally in a way that made me think there was something real there. She had this calm, self-assured vibe, the kind of person who seemed like she had life figured out. I liked that about her. So when she said she wanted to cook for me, I agreed without hesitation. "I'll make something special," she'd said, her voice warm over the phone. "Trust me, you'll love it." Her apartment was tucked away in an older part of town, in one of those old brick buildings with ivy creeping up the walls. When I arrived, I could already smell something cooking, rich, earthy, and faintly sweet. It was the kind of smell that made your stomach rumble, and I found myself smiling as I knocked on the door. She answered almost immediately, flashing me a smile that was both welcoming and a little mischievous. "Right on time," she said, stepping aside to let me in. The apartment was small but cozy, filled with soft lighting and an eclectic mix of furniture. A record player in the corner hummed out low, jazzy tunes, and the air was thick with the scent of whatever she was cooking. On the far wall, shelves lined with books and potted plants gave the space an almost magical feel, like I'd stepped into another world. "The food's almost ready," she said, leading me toward the kitchen. "I hope you're hungry." "Starving," I replied, glancing at the table she'd set. It was simple but elegant, 2 plates, lit by the warm glow of a single candle. A bottle of wine sat open between them, the deep red liquid catching the light. Maya moved gracefully around the kitchen, her movements deliberate and precise. She wore a loose, flowing dress that swayed as she worked, her dark hair tied back to reveal the sharp lines of her cheekbones. "I made something a little different tonight," she said, her tone light, almost playful. "I hope you're up for an adventure." I laughed. "As long as it's edible, I'm game." She smirked, sliding 2 plates onto the table. The food looked incredible, some kind of pasta dish, the sauce thick and dark, flecked with herbs I didn't recognize. The smell was intoxicating, richer and more complex than anything I'd ever had before. "This smells amazing," I said, sitting down across from her. "Wait until you taste it," she replied, pouring wine into my glass. Her eyes caught the candlelight as she lifted her own glass. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. The first bite was indescribable. The flavors exploded in my mouth, rich and earthy with a sharp, almost metallic tang that lingered on my tongue. It was unlike anything I'd ever tasted before. For a moment, I just sat there, stunned by how good it was. "This is incredible," I said, taking another bite. "What's in it?" She smiled, tilting her head slightly. "A little bit of this, a little bit of that," she said cryptically. "It's a family recipe. Very special." I didn't press her on it. I was too busy eating, each bite more satisfying than the last. The wine paired perfectly with the dish, its smooth, velvety texture cutting through the richness of the sauce. I felt warm, content, like the world outside her apartment didn't exist. But then something shifted. It started subtly. The edges of my vision softened, the candlelight flickering in a way that seemed too deliberate, too alive. The music from the record player grew louder, the notes bending and twisting in ways that didn't make sense. I blinked, trying to focus, but the room felt like it was expanding and contracting around me, the walls breathing in time with my heartbeat. "Maya," I said, my voice sounding distant and hollow. What's in this?" She set her fork down, her expression calm, almost serene. "Don't fight it," she said softly. "Just let it happen." "Let what happen?" I asked, panic creeping into my voice. My hands felt disconnected from my body, the fork slipping from my fingers and clattering onto the plate. "What did you do?" Her smile widened, but it wasn't comforting. It was knowing, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "You're seeing the world for what it really is," she said, her voice low and melodic. "I'm helping you." The room shifted again, the shadows on the walls stretching and twisting into shapes that didn't make sense. Faces appeared in the darkness, their features sharp and angular, their eyes glowing faintly. The air felt thick, like I was moving through water, and the sound of my heartbeat filled my ears, loud and thunderous. I tried to stand, but my legs felt like jelly. "What the hell is happening?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "You're waking up," Maya said, leaning closer. Her face was impossibly clear, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that burned. "You've been asleep your whole life, Ethan. But now you're finally seeing the truth." "What truth?" I asked, but the words barely made it past my lips. The room was spinning now, the shadows closing in, and I felt like I was falling, even though I hadn't moved. She reached out, her fingers brushing against my cheek. Her touch was cool, grounding me just enough to keep me from completely spiraling. "The truth of the world," she said softly. "The way it really works. The things you've been blind to, the things you've ignored. I'm giving you a gift, Ethan. You'll thank me for this one day." I couldn't respond. My throat felt tight, my tongue heavy. The faces in the shadows were moving now, their mouths opening and closing in silent screams. The air buzzed with an energy I couldn't understand, and the sound of Maya's voice wove through it all, low and hypnotic. "Just breathe," she said, her tone soothing. "Let it wash over you." I tried. God, I tried. But the more I breathed, the more the room seemed to dissolve around me, the walls melting into the air, the floor shifting beneath my feet. I wasn't in her apartment anymore. I was somewhere else. A vast, dark expanse filled with flickering lights and shifting shapes. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once, and I couldn't tell if I was floating or falling. Maya's voice echoed in the void, calm and steady. "You're free now," she said. "Don't be afraid." I wasn't sure how long I was there, minutes, hours, days. Time didn't exist in that place. When I finally came back to myself, I was lying on her couch, a blanket draped over me. The record player was still spinning, the soft hum of jazz filling the air. Maya was sitting in a chair across from me, sipping a cup of tea like nothing had happened. "Welcome back," she said, her smile soft but unreadable. I sat up slowly, my head pounding. What did you do to me?" "I showed you the truth," she said simply. "The rest is up to you." I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't want to know. I just grabbed my jacket and left, her calm gaze following me out the door. I thought it was going to be a normal coffee date. Just two people meeting up for the first time to see if the energy we had texting would translate in person. I didn't expect it to feel like stepping into another reality. I got to the cafe 10 minutes early, figuring it was better to wait for her than to rush in late and flustered. The place was cozy, dim lighting, shelves lined with books and plants, the hum of quiet conversations blending with the soft clink of mugs on saucers. I grabbed a small table near the back, ordered a plain black coffee, and tried to calm my nerves. Her name was Celeste, and she had been different from others I'd met online. Her profile was sparse, just a single photo of her sitting in a field of wildflowers, her face half hidden behind her hand. Her bio read, "I believe in unlocking potential. Don't waste your soul." I'd almost swiped left, thinking it was one of those overly spiritual profiles that I'd never be able to relate to, but something about the photo, about her, had made me hesitate. She looked ethereal, I guess, like she didn't quite belong in this world. And now, as I sat there waiting for her, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd made a mistake. When she walked in, I knew it was her immediately. She didn't look like her photo exactly. There was no wildflower field framing her, but she had that same otherworldly quality, like she was moving to a rhythm no one else could hear. She was wearing a flowing white dress that swayed around her ankles and carrying a bird cage. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Who brings a bird cage to a coffee date? But there it was, dangling from her hand, the metal bars catching the light as she moved. Inside was a small, pale bird, perched on a wooden swing. Its feathers were so white they almost shimmered, and it didn't make a sound, just sat there, its head tilting slightly as if it were listening. "Hi," she said, her voice soft but clear, like the first note of a song. "You must be Ethan." "Yeah," I said, standing awkwardly and gesturing to the seat across from mine. "And you're Celeste. Nice to finally meet you." She smiled, setting the bird cage down gently on the table before sitting herself. "It's nice to meet you too," she said. Her eyes, an unsettling pale gray, locked onto mine, and for a moment, it felt like she was looking straight through me. I couldn't stop staring at the bird cage. It sat between us like a barrier, the tiny bird inside shifting slightly, but still eerily quiet. "So, I said, trying to sound casual, "what's with the bird?" Her smile widened, and she reached out, tracing her fingers along the bars of the cage. Her nails were painted a soft, pearly white, matching the bird's feathers almost perfectly. "It's not just a bird," she said, her tone light but with an edge of something deeper. "It's your soul." I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but her expression didn't change. She wasn't laughing. "Wait, what?" She tilted her head, her fingers still brushing the cage. "Your soul," she repeated, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "It's been trapped for a long time, but I'm here to help you free it." I stared at her, unsure how to respond. "That's interesting," I said finally, my voice trailing off. "But I'm pretty sure my soul is right here inside me." She shook her head slowly, like a teacher correcting a child. "No, Ethan. That's just what you've been told. Most people don't even realize their souls are trapped. They go through life feeling incomplete, like something's missing, but they can't explain why. That's because their souls are caged, just like this." She gestured to the bird, which blinked at me with an unnervingly human-like intelligence. I took a sip of my coffee, trying to hide my growing discomfort. "So, how exactly do you know that's my soul?" She leaned forward, her intensity washing over me like a wave. "I can see it," she said. "Not everyone can, but I can. It's part of my gift. And I could feel yours the moment we started talking. It called out to me, begging for freedom." I glanced around the cafe, half expecting someone to come over and tell me I was being pranked. But no one was paying us any attention. It was just me, Celeste, and the birdcage. Okay, I said slowly, trying to keep my tone light. Let's say, for argument's sake, that the bird is my soul. How do you free it? Her smile returned, softer now, almost tender. That's the easy part, she said. You just have to let go. Let go of your fears, your doubts, your attachments to this world. Once you do that, the cage will open, and your soul will be free to reach its full potential. And what happens to me if my soul is free? I asked, leaning back slightly. You become who you were always meant to be, she said simply. You transcend. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to laugh, to call her crazy and leave, but there was something about her, about the way she spoke, the way she looked at me, that made it impossible to dismiss her entirely. Her words felt like they were wrapping around me, sinking into my skin, and I couldn't tell if it was the rhythm of her voice or the way her fingers traced the cage bars in time with the soft cooing of the bird. Celeste reached into her bag and pulled out a small silver key. She held it up, the metal catching the light, and smiled. This is the key, she said. But I can't use it. Only you can. She placed the key on the table, sliding it toward me. Her fingers brushed mine as she let go, sending a shiver up my spine. All you have to do is unlock the cage, she said, her voice low and melodic. And everything will change. I stared at the key, my mind racing. Was this some kind of elaborate metaphor? A test? Or was she genuinely out of her mind? The bird let out a soft chirp, the first sound it had made, and I flinched. Why me? I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Because you're ready, she said. Even if you don't know it yet. I picked up the key, turning it over in my hand. It was surprisingly warm, as if it had been sitting in the sun. My heart was pounding, and I didn't know why. It was just a bird cage, just a bird. None of this was real. And yet, do it, she urged, her voice dropping to a whisper. Set yourself free. I hesitated, the key hovering over the lock. My hand was shaking, and I couldn't tell if it was fear, excitement, or something else entirely. Celeste's eyes were locked on mine, her expression a mix of anticipation and something darker, something I couldn't quite place. The sound of the bird's soft cooing filled the silence, and for a brief moment, it felt like the whole world had narrowed down to just the three of us, the bird, Celeste, and me. I could feel her breath on my skin, warm and steady, as she leaned closer. Do it, she whispered again. I slid the key into the lock, and the sound it made as it turned was almost deafening in the quiet cafe. The cage door swung open, and the bird stepped forward, its tiny claws gripping the edge of the perch. For a heartbeat, it just sat there, staring at me with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. Then it spread its wings and flew. The moment it left the cage, a strange sensation washed over me, like a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been lifted. My vision blurred, and for a second, I thought I might pass out. When I blinked, the bird was gone, and Celeste was smiling. Congratulations, she said, reaching out to take the cage. You're free now. I thought it would be fun. Who doesn't love an amusement park, right? The energy, the lights, the smell of popcorn and cotton candy, and the thrill of rides that make you feel like a kid again. When Lauren suggested we spend the day at Wild Ridge Amusement Park, I couldn't say no. It sounded like the perfect way to break the ice, something exciting, casual, and carefree. That's how I thought it would go, at least. When I spotted her waiting at the entrance, she was already grinning, clutching 2 oversized soda cups in her hands. She was wearing a simple tank top and jean shorts, her hair pulled back into a ponytail that swayed whenever she moved. She radiated this kind of easy warmth, the kind that instantly put me at ease. Well, look who finally made it, she teased, handing me one of the sodas. Hey, I'm not late, I said, laughing as I took it. Barely. Uh-huh, she said, her grin widening. You're lucky I like you. Otherwise, I'd already be on the Ferris wheel by now. I laughed again, feeling the last bit of nervous tension in my chest dissolve. This was going to be fun. I could feel it. The first hour was perfect. We hit the smaller rides first, the bumper cars, the spinning teacups, and the swings that spun out over the park. Her laughter was infectious, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't overthinking anything. We were just enjoying ourselves. Then we saw the roller coaster. It was massive. Twisting steel tracks looped high into the air, the cars speeding by in a blur of color and screams. Lauren's eyes lit up the moment she saw it, and she grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the line like a kid on Christmas morning. This is my favorite ride, she said, practically bouncing as we got in line. You're not scared, are you? Me? Scared? I said, puffing out my chest playfully. Not a chance. Good, she said, smirking. Because this one's intense. The line moved quickly, and before I knew it, we were strapped into the front row, the lap bar pressing down tightly against my legs. My heart was racing, not from fear, I told myself, but from excitement. Lauren glanced at me, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. You ready? She asked, her voice barely audible over the clatter of the cars locking into place. Let's do it, I said, gripping the safety bar tightly. The ride started with a slow climb, the clicking of the chain pulling us higher and higher. I could see the whole park from up there, the lights and crowds sprawling out beneath us like a living, breathing thing. Lauren raised her arms, laughing as the wind whipped around us. Then we plunged. The first drop was a gut-wrenching freefall, the kind that makes your stomach flip and your breath catch in your throat. The cars whipped around corners, shot through loops, and raced along the tracks with a speed that left me dizzy. Lauren was screaming, but it wasn't the kind of scream that came from fear. It was pure, unfiltered joy. And then the ride stopped. We were halfway through, suspended on a section of track just before another drop. The cars jolted slightly, then stilled, the wind whistling faintly around us. I looked over at Lauren, who was still smiling, though now there was a nervous edge to it. Is this normal? I asked, my voice tight. Not really, she said, glancing around. But I'm sure they'll get it fixed soon. Minutes passed. The other passengers were murmuring nervously, some shouting down to the workers below. I could hear snippets of conversation. It's probably just a technical thing. Do you think we'll have to climb down? But none of it made me feel any better. Great, I muttered, trying to shift in my seat. This is just perfect. Lauren shot me a look. Relax. It's not a big deal. Stuff like this happens all the time. It doesn't happen to me, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She raised an eyebrow. What's that supposed to mean? I mean, this kind of thing doesn't just happen randomly, I said, my frustration bubbling over. It's like bad energy or something. Bad energy? She repeated, her tone sharp. What are you talking about? I gestured vaguely to the stalled ride, the people around us, the whole situation. I don't know, it's just weird. Like maybe it's you. Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me? I'm just saying, I said quickly, trying to backpedal. Stuff like this doesn't happen to me. Maybe it's your vibe or something. My vibe, she said, her voice rising. Are you serious right now? I didn't mean it like that, I said, but it was too late. The damage was done. You think I caused this? She said, her tone dripping with disbelief. What? Do you think I cursed the ride or something? No, I didn't say that, I said, though the words felt hollow even to me. I just meant. Wow, she said, cutting me off. That's wow. I don't even know what to say to that. I opened my mouth to respond, but the ride jolted suddenly, cutting me off. The cars creaked and groaned, then started moving again, inching forward before picking up speed. The rest of the ride was a blur, the drops and loops overshadowed by the weight of what I'd just said. When we finally pulled back into the station, Lauren didn't look at me. She climbed out of the car and walked ahead, her shoulders stiff, her jaw tight. I followed, trying to think of something, anything, that could salvage the situation. Lauren, wait, I said as we stepped off the platform. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. She stopped, turning to face me. Her expression was calm, but her eyes burned with an intensity that made me take a step back. You know what? She said. Forget it. This was supposed to be fun, and you just ruined it. I didn't. I started, but she held up a hand, silencing me. Don't, she said. Just don't. With that, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd before I could say another word. I stood there, the sounds of the park swirling around me, feeling like the biggest idiot in the world. The sun was shining, the waves were rolling, and the warm sand beneath my feet felt like the perfect start to what I hoped would be a fun, easygoing day. I wasn't typically a beach person, but when Jenna suggested we spend our first date here, I figured why not? It was something different, and she'd seemed so excited about it over text that I couldn't bring myself to say no. When I saw her standing by the shoreline, I couldn't help but smile. She was wearing a bright yellow bikini, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, sunglasses perched on top of her head. She looked confident, relaxed, and completely in her element. Part of me envied that, how comfortable she seemed in her skin, how the world around her seemed to melt away as she tossed a beach ball into the air and caught it. Hey, she called, waving when she spotted me. Her smile was wide and genuine, and I felt a flicker of excitement in my chest as I waved back. "Hey," I said, walking over to meet her. The beach was crowded, but she stood out like a beacon, her energy practically glowing in the sunlight. "You weren't kidding when you said you loved the beach." "Told you," she said with a laugh. "It's my happy place." We set up our spot near the water, laying out towels and setting up a small umbrella to keep the sun off our cooler. She'd brought sandwiches, chips, and a couple of drinks, and everything about the setup screamed effort. It was sweet, really. It felt like she wanted this to go well, and I appreciated that more than I could say. But then I screwed it up. It started small, just a passing thought that I should have kept to myself. But my mouth had a habit of running ahead of my brain, and before I could stop myself, the words were out. "So, yellow's a bold choice," I said, gesturing toward her bikini as I sat down on one of the towels. She paused, her hand halfway to the cooler. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone light but with a hint of something guarded. "I mean, it's bright," I said, forcing a chuckle. "Not everyone can pull off a bikini like that." Her smile faltered for just a second, just long enough for me to notice, and she sat down across from me, crossing her legs. "You think so?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Yeah, I mean, it's fine," I said quickly, realizing too late that I was digging myself into a hole. "It's just, maybe not what I would have picked." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, and she tilted her head. "What would you have picked?" she asked, her tone still light but with an edge I couldn't ignore. I shrugged, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "I don't know. Something a little more subtle, maybe? Like black or navy. Something classic." She let out a short, humorless laugh, shaking her head. "Wow," she said, leaning back on her hands. "I didn't realize I was supposed to run my outfit choices by you." I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I'd thought I was being harmless, just making small talk, but I could see now that I'd hit a nerve. "You don't think I can pull it off?" she continued, her voice sharper now. "Is that it?" No, that's not what I meant," I said quickly, holding up my hands. "I just meant..." "You just meant what?" she interrupted, sitting up straight. "That I should cover up more? That I don't look good enough to wear something bright and fun?" I felt my face flush with heat. "No, Jenna, that's not what I'm saying at all. I think you look great." "Do you?" she asked, her gaze piercing. "Because it kind of sounds like you're saying I don't." I wanted to crawl into a hole. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to upset you." She sighed, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "Look, I get it," she said, her tone softening slightly. "Maybe you didn't mean anything by it. But do you have any idea how hard it is to just feel good about yourself sometimes? And then to hear someone say, even accidentally, that maybe you're not enough? It sucks." I nodded, guilt twisting in my chest. "You're right," I said. "I shouldn't have said anything. I'm sorry." She gave me a small, tight smile. "Thanks," she said. "But maybe next time, think a little harder about what you're about to say. Words matter." The rest of the day was fine, I guess. We stayed on the beach, ate the food she'd packed, and even went for a swim. But the easy, carefree energy that had been there at the beginning was gone, replaced by a tension that neither of us could quite shake. As we packed up to leave, I tried to make things right. "I really did have a good time," I said, forcing a smile. "And for what it's worth, I think you looked amazing." She smiled back, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks," she said simply. I wasn't looking for anything serious when I swiped through Tinder that night. It was more out of boredom than anything else, a little distraction while I lounged on the couch in my sweats, scrolling mindlessly past profiles that all seemed to blend together. But then I saw his face. His name was Chris, and his picture caught me off guard because I recognized him. He worked in the same office as me. Different department, sure, but we passed each other in the hallways often enough that his face was familiar. I knew he was part of the IT team, quiet, reserved, always polite but never one for small talk. He wasn't someone I'd ever given much thought to, but there he was, staring back at me on my screen with a shy smile and a bio that read, "Just a guy who loves tech, coffee, and a good conversation." I hesitated. Swiping right on someone from work felt risky. What if it got awkward? What if he told people? But then I thought, what's the harm? We weren't exactly best friends, or even close colleagues. If we matched, we'd see where it went. If we didn't, he'd never know I swiped on him in the first place. No harm, no foul. So I swiped right. We matched almost instantly. At first, it was fine, nice even. He messaged me within minutes, his tone friendly but not overly pushy. He mentioned how funny it was to see me on Tinder and joked about how small the world was. I laughed it off, and we started chatting. It was surprisingly easy to talk to him. He asked about my favorite shows, my hobbies, even my go-to-coffee order. For someone who barely said a word at work, he was charming in text. But as the conversation went on, something started to feel off. He wasn't overtly creepy or anything, just a little too eager. His messages came in rapid succession, and if I didn't reply immediately, he'd send a follow-up. "You there? Or did I say something wrong?" It was subtle, but the intensity was there, bubbling just beneath the surface. The next day at work, I couldn't shake the weird feeling. I spotted him in the break room, standing by the coffee machine, and for the first time, I felt self-conscious around him. He didn't say anything, just gave me a small wave and a polite smile, but I could feel his eyes linger on me as I walked past. By the end of the day, I knew I had to say something. Whatever was happening between us needed to stop before it got out of hand. So that evening, I sent him a message. "Hey Chris, I've been thinking, and I don't think it's a good idea for us to keep talking like this. I think I swiped on you by mistake. I don't want things to get weird at work, so I think it's best if we just stay co-workers. Hope you understand." I stared at the screen for a long moment before hitting send. It wasn't the easiest message to write, but I thought it was clear and respectful. Still, my heart raced as I waited for his reply. It came almost immediately. "I get it," he wrote. "No problem. See you at work." I let out a sigh of relief. That wasn't so bad. The next day I noticed it. The way he seemed to be everywhere. He wasn't in my department, but suddenly he was walking past my desk more often than usual, stopping to chat with people nearby or pretending to check something on his phone. At lunch, he sat at the table directly across from mine, even though he usually ate in the break room. When I left the office that afternoon, I swore I saw him standing by the parking lot, watching as I got into my car. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe he was just trying to be friendly, or maybe it was a coincidence. But as the days went on, it became impossible to ignore. He started sending me messages again, despite my earlier text. They were casual at first, just little comments about work or jokes about our co-workers, but when I didn't reply, they became more insistent. "Why aren't you answering? Did I do something wrong? We were having such a good time talking. Why did you change your mind?" I didn't respond. I thought ignoring him would make him stop, but it only seemed to make him try harder. He started emailing me at work, asking if I wanted to grab lunch or go for coffee. When I didn't respond to those either, he left a note on my desk one morning. "We need to talk." That was the moment I knew I couldn't handle this on my own. I went straight to HR. The HR manager, Lisa, was a kind woman in her 40s who'd worked at the company for years. She listened patiently as I explained everything, how we'd matched on Tinder, how I'd told him I wasn't interested, and how he'd been following me around the office ever since. I showed her the messages, the emails, even the note he'd left on my desk. "This is completely unacceptable," Lisa said, her expression hardening as she flipped through the screenshots I'd printed out. "You shouldn't have to deal with this." "What should I do?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I don't want to cause a scene, but I can't keep coming to work like this." "Don't worry," she said firmly. "We'll handle it." The next day, Chris wasn't at work. I found out later from Lisa that he'd been called into a meeting with HR and was put on leave while they investigated the situation. It was a relief to know I wouldn't have to see him, but it didn't stop the messages. He started texting me from a different number, begging me to talk to him, accusing me of ruining his life. "I can't believe you went to HR. You didn't have to do that. I thought we had something special. You'll regret this." I blocked the number, but he found other ways to contact me, through social media, through email. One night, I came home to find a note taped to my apartment door. "Can we please talk?" My stomach dropped. How had he found out where I lived? That was when I called the police. The police took my report seriously, and a restraining order was filed against Chris. For a while, things seemed to calm down. He was officially terminated from the company, and the messages stopped. I started to feel like I could breathe again, like I could finally move on. But then, one night, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was a text from an unknown number. "I saw you today. You looked beautiful." My blood ran cold. I hadn't seen him, hadn't even thought about him in weeks, but now, the fear came rushing back. I called the police again, and they assured me they'd look into it. But the damage was done. Every time I left my apartment, I felt like I was being watched. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped into my throat. It took months for the fear to fade. Eventually, the messages stopped for good, and I moved to a new apartment, changed my number, and deleted my social media accounts. Life went back to normal, or as normal as it could be after something like that. I wasn't sure what to expect when I matched with Damien. He had that kind of artsy, mysterious vibe that could either be fascinating or pretentious, depending on how you looked at it. His profile was full of cryptic statements like, "The mind is a labyrinth, and I've spent my life learning how to navigate it," and "I can show you things about yourself you never knew." Normally, I'd swipe left on something so vague, but he had this quiet confidence in his photos, dark, deep-set eyes, a slight smirk that seemed to promise he knew something about the world the rest of us didn't. Against my better judgment, I swiped right. Our chats were interesting, at least. He told me he worked as a hypnotherapist, helping people overcome fears, addictions, and even trauma through guided hypnosis. It sounded impressive, and I couldn't deny it was intriguing. He seemed passionate about it too, which was a refreshing change from the endless stream of WID texts I usually got on Tinder. After a few days of chatting, he invited me over to his place for dinner. He said he wanted to cook for me and maybe demonstrate his craft. It sounded harmless enough, maybe even fun, so I said yes. The night of the date, I arrived at his apartment feeling equal parts excited and nervous. The building was older, with tall ceilings and narrow hallways, and his unit was at the very end. When I knocked, the door opened almost immediately, and there he was, dressed in a crisp black button-up and dark jeans, his hair tousled just enough to look effortlessly put together. He smiled as he stepped aside, gesturing for me to come in. "Welcome," he said, his voice smooth and low. "I'm so glad you came." His apartment was exactly what I'd imagined, dimly lit, with walls lined with bookshelves and strange artifacts. A large crystal sat on the coffee table, and there were framed photos of abstract shapes and spirals that seemed to twist and turn the longer I looked at them. The smell of something savory wafted in from the kitchen, and I noticed a small dining table set for two, complete with candles and a bottle of wine. "Wow," I said, taking it all in. "You really went all out." He gave me that slight smirk I'd seen in his photos. "Only the best for my guest." Dinner was surprisingly great, pasta with a homemade sauce, garlic bread, and a salad. We talked about everything, from his work as a hypnotherapist to my admittedly boring desk job. He had a way of making even the simplest topics seem fascinating, like he was peeling back layers of meaning I hadn't even known were there. It was easy to get lost in the way he spoke, his words flowing like water, smooth and unbroken. After dinner, he poured us each another glass of wine and leaned back in his chair, studying me with those intense, dark eyes. "So," he said, his voice taking on a playful edge, "are you ready?" "For what?" I asked, though I had a feeling I already knew. "To experience hypnosis," he said, smiling. "I told you I'd show you what I do, didn't I?" I hesitated, glancing down at my wine glass. "I don't know," I said. "I've never done anything like that before." "That's the best time to try it," he said, leaning forward slightly. "I promise it's completely safe. You'll be in control the entire time. It's just relaxing, like guided meditation." I really didn't want to seem rude, and he'd been so nice all evening. Plus, a part of me was curious. It wasn't every day you got the chance to be hypnotized by a professional. "All right," I said finally. "Let's do it." His smile widened, and he stood, gesturing for me to follow him into the living room. He guided me to the couch and sat down in the chair across from me, his movements slow and deliberate. The dim lighting and the soft hum of music playing in the background made the whole scene feel surreal, almost dreamlike. "Just relax," he said, his voice dropping into an even softer tone. "Get comfortable. You can close your eyes if you want, or keep them open. Whatever feels best." I nodded, leaning back into the couch. My heart was racing a bit, but I tried to calm myself, taking a deep breath as he began to speak. "Focus on my voice," he said, his words smooth and rhythmic. "Let everything else fade away. The sounds, the lights, even the feel of the couch beneath you. Just let it all drift into the background. You're safe here, and you're fully in control." His voice wrapped around me like a warm blanket, and I felt my muscles begin to loosen. My eyes fluttered closed almost involuntarily, and I let myself sink into the cadence of his words. "Good," he said softly. "Now, I want you to imagine a staircase. It's a beautiful staircase, carved from the smoothest wood. Each step feels solid beneath your feet, and as you take each one, you feel yourself sinking deeper and deeper into relaxation. I don't know how long I sat there, listening to his voice. It was like I was floating, weightless and untethered from reality. At some point, he started asking me questions, simple ones at first, like what my favorite color was or what I liked to do for fun. But then the questions started to shift. "Do you trust me?" he asked, his voice still soft but with an edge of something deeper. "Yes," I heard myself say, though the word felt heavy on my tongue. "Good," he said, "because I want to help you let go. Let go of your inhibitions, your fears. They're holding you back." I felt a flicker of unease, but it was buried under layers of calm, like a faint echo in a distant room. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You've built walls," he said. "Walls that keep you from being truly free. But I can help you break them down. You want that, don't you?" "I don't know," I said, my chest tightening slightly. "You do," he insisted, his tone firmer now. "You just don't realize it yet. Trust me, and I'll show you." Something about his words made my stomach churn, and I forced my eyes open, blinking against the dim light. He was still sitting in the chair, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "I think I'm done," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "You're so close," he said. "Why stop now?" I'm not comfortable," I said, sitting up straighter. "Thank you, but I think I should go." For a moment, he didn't move, his dark eyes locked on mine. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Of course," he said, his voice light again. "I understand." He walked me to the door, his demeanor as charming as ever, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd narrowly escaped something. As I drove home, my mind replayed his words, the way he'd spoken to me like he knew me better than I knew myself. It wasn't until I was safely in my apartment that I realized my hands were still shaking. When she told me she was a ventriloquist, I thought it was kind of cool. Not many people have hobbies that unique, and honestly, it was one of the things that made her stand out when we matched. Her name was Claire, and she had this quirky, self-assured energy that made her seem like the kind of person who could make anything fun. So when she invited me over for a quiet night in, just me, you, and a bit of practice with my latest routine, as she'd put it, I didn't think twice about saying yes. Her apartment was small but cozy, with mismatched furniture and walls decorated with old movie posters. It smelled faintly of vanilla and wood polish, and soft jazz played from a record player in the corner. The vibe was warm and inviting, much like Claire herself. "Make yourself at home," she said, flashing me that bright, easy smile as she handed me a glass of wine. "I just need a minute to grab her." "Her?" I asked, taking a sip. She grinned. "You'll see." I assumed she was talking about one of her puppets, or dummies, or whatever ventriloquists call them. I'd seen pictures of her performing on her social media, and the puppets had always been cartoonish, almost goofy looking. But when she came back into the room, carrying what looked like an actual life-sized human, my stomach flipped. The doll, no, the mannequin, was dressed exactly like Claire. Same white blouse, same black skirt, even the same high ponytail. Its face was eerily lifelike, with painted features that mimicked Claire's own sharp cheekbones and soft, rosy lips. The eyes, though glassy, seemed to follow me as she carried it across the room. It was uncanny, and I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine. "This," Claire said, setting the mannequin gently into the chair across from mine, "is Clara." I stared, unsure whether to laugh or run. "Clara?" I repeated. "Yup," she said, plopping down on the couch beside the mannequin. "She's my new muse. I've been working on a whole routine with her, and it's going to be amazing once I get the timing right." I forced a smile, trying not to let my unease show. "She's, really detailed." Claire beamed, clearly pleased by my reaction. "Isn't she? I designed her myself. Had a friend help 3D print the face, and I styled the wig to match my hair. The clothes are from my own closet. She's basically me, but, quieter." I laughed nervously. "That's impressive. A little creepy, but impressive." "Creepy?" Claire repeated, her head tilting slightly as she studied me. "Why creepy?" I hesitated, not wanting to offend her. "Well, it's just, she looks so real. Like if I didn't know she was a mannequin, I'd think she was a person." Claire's smile widened, but there was something off about it now, something sharper, more knowing. "That's the point," she said. "She's supposed to blur the line between reality and illusion. That's what ventriloquism is all about, isn't it? Making you believe the unbelievable." "Right," I said, shifting uncomfortably in my seat. "That makes sense." "Anyway," she said, leaning back and crossing her legs. Why don't I show you a bit of what I've been working on? Clara's dying to meet you. Sure, I said, though my voice came out a little too high-pitched. I took another sip of wine, hoping it would calm my nerves. Claire turned to the mannequin, her expression softening. Clara, she said, her tone playful. Say hello to Ethan. There was a pause, and then a voice, Claire's voice, but higher, smoother, spoke. Hello, Ethan, the mannequin said, its head turning slightly toward me. It's so nice to finally meet you. I nearly dropped my glass. Claire's lips hadn't moved, not even a little. The voice had come from her, I was sure of it, but the way her face stayed perfectly still made it feel like the mannequin was speaking on its own. Hi, I said, giving the mannequin a small, awkward wave. Nice to meet you too. Clara's painted lips curled into a smile. At least, that's what it felt like, though I knew logically they hadn't moved. He's cute, the mannequin said, its glassy eyes fixed on me. You didn't tell me he was cute. Claire laughed, her hand resting lightly on Clara's shoulder. I didn't want to make you jealous, she said, her lips finally moving again. I'm not jealous, Clara said quickly, her tone sharp. Why would I be jealous? He's just a boy. Hey now, I said, trying to join in on the joke. I'm not just a boy. Clara's head tilted slightly, her unblinking eyes locking onto mine. You're right, she said. You're more than that. You're interesting. Something about the way she said it made my stomach twist. I glanced at Claire, expecting her to laugh or reassure me that it was all part of the act, but she was staring at the mannequin with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Clara, Claire said softly, her voice low and measured, be nice. The mannequin's glassy eyes didn't move, but I could feel them boring into me. I am being nice, she said. Aren't I, Ethan? Why, yeah, I said, forcing a laugh. You're great. Claire smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. See? He likes you. For the next 20 minutes, Claire performed her routine, switching seamlessly between her own voice and Clara's. The banter was sharp, almost too sharp, with Clara making sly, cutting remarks that seemed aimed more at me than at Claire. It was impressive, sure, but it was also unsettling. At one point, Clara turned to me and said, You know, you'd make a great puppet. I laughed nervously. Thanks. I'm serious, she said, her voice soft but insistent. You've got the perfect face for it. All I'd have to do is hollow you out and... Clara, Claire interrupted sharply, her hand gripping the mannequin's shoulder. That's enough. The mannequin fell silent, its head tilting downward as if chastened. Claire turned to me, her expression apologetic. Sorry about that, she said. Sometimes she gets carried away. Right, I said, setting my glass down. No worries. But I was worried. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't name. I found myself glancing at the mannequin every few seconds, half expecting it to move on its own. It didn't, of course, but the tension lingered, wrapping itself around me like a cold, invisible hand. When the routine was over, Claire walked me to the door, her smile warm and genuine again. Thanks for letting me practice on you, she said. I know Clara can be a little intense. It's fine, I said, though my voice wavered slightly. You're really talented. Thanks, she said, her eyes sparkling. Maybe next time, she'll behave herself. I forced a laugh, nodding as I stepped out into the hallway. Yeah, maybe. As the door closed behind me, I let out a shaky breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that Clara's eyes were still on me, watching me even as I walked away. It started off like any other first date, a casual meet-up at a bar downtown, nothing fancy, nothing formal. I had been texting with Mia for about a week, and while she came across as a little high energy, I chalked it up to nerves or excitement. She wasn't the type to hold back in messages, lots of exclamation points, lots of LOLs, and a constant stream of memes that always seemed to arrive just as I was about to put my phone down. It was endearing in a way, though I wondered if she'd be the same in person. When I got to the bar, she was already there, sitting at a high-top table by the window. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose braid, and she was wearing a bright red dress that made her stand out in the dim, neon-lit room. She waved the second she saw me, her smile wide and a little too eager, like she'd been waiting for this moment all day. Hey, you made it, she said as I walked over, her voice already cutting through the low hum of music and conversation. Of course, I replied, sliding onto the stool across from her. I couldn't miss it. There were already 2 empty shot glasses in front of her, and she was holding a third, which she raised in a mock toast. I figured I'd get started early, she said with a laugh. But don't worry, I saved plenty for you. I laughed nervously, glancing at the bartender who was already hovering nearby. I think I'll start with a beer, actually. Mia's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to notice, but then it was back, brighter than before. Beer's fine, she said, her tone light but with a hint of something behind it. But you're doing at least one shot with me. It's a rule. A rule? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, she said, leaning forward, her elbows resting on the sticky surface of the table. First dates should always start with a shot. Breaks the ice. I hesitated, but before I could say anything, she flagged down the bartender and ordered 2 more shots of tequila. She didn't ask what I liked, just assumed I'd go along with it. The bartender placed the glasses in front of us, and Mia grabbed hers immediately, holding it out to me. To new friends, she said, her smile sharp and expectant. I didn't want to seem like a buzzkill, so I picked up the glass and tapped it against hers. To new friends, I echoed, throwing the shot back. The tequila burned my throat, and I grimaced, setting the glass down quickly. There you go, Mia said, clapping her hands like I'd just passed some kind of test. See? That wasn't so bad. I laughed, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. Yeah, not bad. But that was just the beginning. Before I even had a chance to order my beer, Mia was waving the bartender over again. Another round of shots appeared in front of us, and she slid one across the table to me. Your turn, she said, her tone playful but firm. You can't stop now. I hesitated, glancing down at the glass. I don't know. I was kind of hoping to pace myself tonight. Come on, she said, rolling her eyes. It's just one more. Don't be boring. Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who kills the mood on a first date. So I picked up the glass and knocked it back, the burn sharper this time. Mia cheered, slamming her own glass down with a grin that was starting to look more manic than friendly. Now we're talking, she said, leaning across the table. You're fun. I like that. The night blurred after that. Mia seemed determined to keep the drinks coming, and every time I tried to slow down, she'd push another glass into my hand, her voice dripping with mockery if I hesitated. What's the matter? She'd say, her tone light but her eyes narrowing. Can't keep up? At one point, I tried to switch to water, but she intercepted the bartender before he could bring it over. He's fine, she said loudly, waving him off. Just get us another round. I laughed nervously, trying to play it off, but inside, I was starting to feel trapped. The bar was getting louder, the neon lights flashing in time with the pounding music. My head was buzzing, not just from the alcohol, but from the growing sense that something was very wrong. Mia's demeanor had shifted too. Her playful energy was tinged with something darker now, something aggressive. She wasn't just trying to have fun. She was testing me, pushing me like she was waiting to see how far she could go before I broke. Her hand brushed against mine at one point, her fingers lingering just a little too long. You're not going to disappoint me, are you? She said softly, her eyes locking onto mine. I hate being disappointed. The words sent a chill down my spine. I forced a smile, nodding quickly. Of course not. Good, she said, leaning back in her chair with a satisfied smirk. Because I really hate quitters. The next shot tasted bitter, almost metallic, and I winced as it went down. My vision was starting to blur at the edges, and the room felt like it was spinning. Mia seemed unaffected, though. If anything, she was more energized, her laughter sharp and grating. You're slowing down, she said, her tone teasing but with an edge of something colder. Come on, one more. For me. I think I'm done, I said, my voice slurring slightly. I've had enough. Her smile dropped, and for the first time that night, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Anger, maybe? Disappointment? Whatever it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same sharp grin. Fine, she said, her tone light again. But you owe me next time. I nodded weakly, grateful for the reprieve. The bartender came over with the check, and I reached for my wallet, but Mia stopped me, her hand covering mine. Don't worry about it, she said, her smile softening. I've got this. I wanted to argue, but I didn't have the energy. My head was pounding, and all I wanted was to get out of there. Mia paid, and we stood to leave, her arm slipping around mine as we walked toward the door. The cold air outside was a shock to my system, and I took a deep breath, hoping it would clear my head. Mia was still clinging to me, her grip tighter than it needed to be. You okay? She asked, her voice dripping with fake concern. Yeah, I muttered. Just need some fresh air. She laughed, the sound echoing in the empty street. Lightweight, she teased, her fingers digging into my arm. You'll do better next time. I didn't respond. My stomach was churning, and all I could think about was getting home. Mia walked me to my car, her grip never loosening, her presence suffocating. When we reached the driver's side door, she leaned in close, her breath hot against my ear. "Drive safe," she whispered, her voice low and mocking. "Wouldn't want anything to happen to you." I froze, my hand hovering over the door handle. There was something in her tone, a hint of malice that sent a jolt of fear through me. I turned to look at her, but she was already walking away, her laughter ringing out in the night. When I first met Liam, I thought he was different. He wasn't like the other guys I'd dated. He didn't come at me with cheesy pickup lines, and he didn't try to act cocky or overconfident. When we matched online, he messaged me first. "So, which band do you think is overrated? Because if you say Radiohead, I might have to block you." I laughed out loud and messaged back, "Don't worry, Radiohead's safe." But Coldplay? That's another story. The coffee shop was cozy, where we agreed to meet. One of those hip little places with mismatched furniture and chalkboard menus. Liam was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table by the window with 2 cappuccinos in front of him. "I hope you like cappuccinos," he said as I sat down. "If not, I'll drink both and pretend this never happened." I laughed, already feeling at ease. "Lucky for you, I do." The date was perfect. He asked all the right questions, told stories that made me laugh until my stomach hurt, and even remembered small details from our chats, like the fact that I hated pineapple on pizza and had a soft spot for terrible rom-coms. When he walked me to my car afterward, he gave me a hug that lingered just long enough to make my heart skip a beat. "I had a great time," he said, smiling down at me. "Can I see you again?" "Yes," I said, my cheeks flushing. "I'd like that." Over the next few weeks, Liam and I fell into an easy rhythm. He'd text me good morning, send me memes throughout the day, and call me at night when he knew I'd be winding down. We went out a few more times, to a concert, a trivia night at a local bar, even a cheesy escape room where we both got way too competitive. He wasn't just my date, he was starting to feel like my person. The only thing that felt a little off was how much he talked about Sophie. It wasn't unusual for my dates to ask about Sophie. She was gorgeous, tall, blonde, with the kind of effortless beauty that turned heads wherever she went. But Liam seemed especially curious about her. He'd ask how we met, what she was like, and even joked about how intimidating it must be to have such a supermodel as a best friend. At first, I brushed it off. Sophie was a big part of my life, so it made sense that Liam would be curious. But as time went on, his comments started to feel excessive. "She seems like so much fun," he said one night as we sat on my couch, watching a movie. "I'd love to meet her someday." "You will," I said, trying not to overthink it. "She's always around." And she was. Sophie and I had been inseparable since college, and we rarely went more than a few days without catching up. She knew all about Liam, how we met, how great he was, how happy he made me. She teased me about him constantly, calling him my boyfriend long before I was ready to use the word myself. "You better bring him to brunch soon," she'd said one morning over mimosas. "I need to make sure he's good enough for you." I laughed, rolling my eyes. "Trust me, you'll love him." The first time Sophie and Liam met was at a party. It was one of those casual get-togethers with too much cheap beer and not enough chairs, and I was nervous about introducing them. I wasn't sure why, maybe because I wanted Sophie to like him as much as I did. Maybe because I wanted Liam to see how important Sophie was to me. When they met, it was like a spark ignited. Liam was his usual charming self, and Sophie was her radiant, bubbly self, and the two of them clicked instantly. They spent most of the night talking, laughing, and trading jokes that I didn't quite get. At one point, I caught Liam watching Sophie with a look I couldn't quite place, something between admiration and longing. I told myself I was imagining it. It wasn't until a few weeks later that the truth came out. Sophie and I were having our usual Friday night hangout, wine, takeout, and a trashy reality show, when she suddenly paused the TV and turned to me. "Hey," she said, her tone cautious. "Can I talk to you about something?" "Of course," I said, setting my wine glass down. "What's up?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "It's about Liam." My stomach dropped. "What about him?" Sophie sighed, running a hand through her hair. "He messaged me." I blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "On Instagram," she said. "He DM'd me. At first, I thought it was just friendly. He said it was cool meeting me and all that. But then he started flirting." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "Flirting?" She nodded, looking uncomfortable. He said he thought I was beautiful, that he'd been wanting to talk to me since the party. He asked if I'd ever consider going out with him. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. What? I'm so sorry, Emma, Sophie said quickly. I didn't know if I should tell you, but I couldn't not tell you. You deserve to know. I sat there, numb, as Sophie pulled out her phone and showed me the messages. There they were, in black and white, Liam, the guy I'd been falling for, telling my best friend that he'd been interested in her all along. That I was just a stepping stone to get to her. I didn't know how to approach you, one message read. But now that we've met, I can't stop thinking about you. I felt sick. When I confronted Liam, he didn't even try to deny it. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, he said, his voice calm, like he was explaining something perfectly reasonable. I didn't know how to approach Sophie without it being weird. So you used me? I said, my voice shaking. You pretended to like me so you could get to her? It wasn't like that, he said quickly. I do like you, Emma. You're amazing. But Sophie, she's just... Don't, I snapped, cutting him off. Don't you dare finish that sentence. He stared at me, his face full of regret that I didn't believe for a second. I grabbed my bag and walked out, leaving him standing there, calling my name. In the days that followed, Sophie was my rock. She blocked Liam on everything, swore up and down that she'd never even considered dating him, and spent hours reassuring me that none of this was my fault. But it was hard not to take it personally. Hard not to wonder what Liam saw in her that he didn't see in me. It took time, but eventually, I realized that Liam's actions said more about him than they did about me. He was selfish, manipulative, and incapable of seeing the worth in the person right in front of him. And honestly, that's his loss. When I matched with Amir on Tinder, I thought it was going to be like any other date. His profile gave off an impression of someone worldly and cultured, a bit more sophisticated than the usual guys I came across. His photos showed him traveling the world, posing in front of the Eiffel Tower, sipping tea in a bustling Moroccan market, and trekking through scenic mountain trails. It was clear he loved adventure. His bio read, lover of deep conversations, good food, and finding meaning in everyday life. Let's share some stories over coffee. There was an authenticity to him that drew me in. He wasn't trying too hard to be funny or edgy, and our conversations reflected that. He was polite, engaging, and curious about me, asking about my favorite books, my career, and even my family. It felt easy. He seemed like someone who genuinely valued connection. When he asked me out for dinner, I didn't hesitate to say yes. We met at a Mediterranean restaurant that Amir recommended. When I arrived, he was already standing outside, waiting for me with a warm smile. He was tall and well-dressed, wearing a dark button-up shirt and jeans that fit just right. His presence was calming, and there was an air of confidence about him that immediately put me at ease. You look lovely, he said, his voice steady and kind. Thank you, I replied, smiling as he held the door open for me. The restaurant was cozy and intimate, with low lighting, soft music, and the mouth-watering aroma of fresh spices. Over plates of hummus, falafel, and lamb skewers, we fell into easy conversation. Amir told me about his childhood, growing up in a big family, and his love of traveling. He spoke about his faith, Islam, and how it kept him centered. It gives me balance, he said, swirling his glass of water thoughtfully. A sense of purpose. That's great, I replied. I think everyone needs something like that in their life. His expression softened as he leaned forward slightly. What about you? Do you believe in anything? The question caught me off guard, but it seemed innocent enough. I guess I'm more spiritual than religious, I said with a shrug. I like the idea of being connected to something bigger, but I don't really follow any specific faith. Amir nodded thoughtfully. I get that, he said. A lot of people feel that way, but I think real peace comes from having a clear path to follow. I wasn't sure how to respond to that, so I just smiled and changed the subject. He let it go, and the conversation moved on to lighter topics. By the time dessert arrived, a plate of baklava for us to share, I was feeling relaxed again. Amir was charming, attentive, and interesting. It felt like one of the better dates I'd had in a long time. After dinner, Amir suggested taking a walk in the nearby park. It's peaceful at night, he said. It sounded nice, so I agreed. The paths were dimly lit by old-fashioned lampposts, and the air was crisp but not too cold. We strolled side by side, talking about nothing in particular, until Amir suddenly stopped and turned to face me. Emma, he said, his tone serious. Can I ask you something? Sure, I replied, caught off guard by the sudden shift. Have you ever thought about what happens after this life? The question hung in the air between us, heavy and unexpected. I hesitated, unsure of where this was going. I mean, I guess everyone thinks about it at some point, I said cautiously. Why? Amir's gaze was intense, but not unkind. Because I think it's the most important question we can ask ourselves. Life is so short, and we spend so much time caught up in things that don't matter. But what happens next, that's forever. I nodded slowly, unsure how to respond. His words carried a weight that made me uncomfortable, but I didn't want to seem rude. I guess that's true, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. He smiled, but there was something different about it this time. It wasn't the warm, easy smile I'd seen earlier. This one felt calculated, almost rehearsed. I don't want to sound pushy, he said, but I feel like I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't share something with you. Something that's changed my life. Oh, I said, my nerves prickling as I glanced around the empty park. What's that? My faith, he said simply. Islam. I blinked, caught off guard. Okay, I said slowly. That's good for you. It's more than good, Amir said, his voice taking on a fervent edge. It's the truth. It's the path to peace, to purpose, to salvation. And I think you owe it to yourself to at least explore it. I stared at him, unsure of what to say. This wasn't what I'd signed up for. I'd come on a date, not a spiritual seminar, but Amir seemed completely oblivious to my discomfort. You don't have to decide anything now, he continued, pulling his phone out of his pocket. But I have some resources I can share with you. Books, videos, even lectures by some amazing scholars. If you're open to it, I think you'll find it really enlightening. Amir, I said, holding up a hand. I appreciate your passion, but I'm not really looking for this. For what? He asked, his brow furrowing. For someone to change me, I said, trying to keep my tone light but firm. I'm happy with who I am. I'm not trying to change you, he said quickly. I'm just trying to help you see your potential. You're such an amazing person, Emma. You deserve more than this world can offer. I took a step back, suddenly feeling trapped. I think we're looking for different things, I said. You seem great, but I don't think this is going to work. His face fell, but only for a moment. Then he smiled again, that same calculated smile from the restaurant. I understand, he said, but if you ever change your mind, my door is always open. I nodded, muttered a polite goodbye, and walked away as quickly as I could. The next day, Amir texted me. Thank you for last night. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope you'll take some time to think about what we talked about. I didn't reply. A few days later, another message came. Hey, Emma. I found a book I think you'd love. Can I send it to you? I blocked his number. But Amir wasn't done. He found me on Instagram and started sending long, rambling messages about how I was denying my potential and ignoring the truth. He even sent me a link to a lecture titled, Why You Should Embrace Islam Today. I blocked him there too, but for weeks, I lived in fear that he'd show up at my door or find another way to contact me. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach twisted into knots, and every time I walked to my car after work, I found myself glancing over my shoulder. I wasn't even going to swipe that night. After a long day at work, all I wanted was to curl up with Netflix and a glass of wine, but loneliness has a funny way of creeping in when you least expect it. So there I was, mindlessly swiping left, until his profile popped up. His name was Alex, and he had this easy, confident smile that felt like it could belong to a guy you'd meet at a bar and end up talking to all night. I swiped. From the first message, Alex came across charismatic, flirty, and engaging. Not before long, he asked me out. Dinner and drinks, he suggested. I know this amazing little rooftop spot downtown. Great food, better views. It sounded perfect, and honestly, I felt a little giddy. It had been a while since I'd met someone who felt promising. So I said yes. The rooftop bar was everything Alex had promised and more. String lights hung above the tables, casting a warm glow over the space, and the city skyline stretched out in every direction. Alex was waiting for me when I arrived, and he looked even better in person, tall, broad-shouldered, with a sharp jawline and a neatly trimmed beard. Wow, he said as I walked up. You're even more beautiful than your pictures. I blushed, smiling as he pulled out my chair. Thanks. You're not so bad yourself. He grinned, and we fell into an easy rhythm. Over dinner, we talked about everything, our favorite movies, embarrassing childhood stories, even our most irrational fears. He was charming, attentive, and just the right amount of cheeky. But there was something else, too, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It started with the compliments. "You have such an innocent vibe about you," he said at one point, his eyes fixed on mine. "Like you don't even realize how captivating you are." I laughed, brushing it off. "I don't know about that." "No, seriously," he insisted. "It's refreshing. Most people these days are so jaded. But you're like a breath of fresh air." It was sweet, if a little intense. I thanked him and changed the subject, but he kept coming back to it. "You're just so pure," he said later as we sipped our drinks. "Not in a naive way, but in a way that makes me want to protect you." "Does that make sense?" I guess," I said, shifting in my seat. It was getting harder to tell if he was being genuine, or if he was just piling on the flattery. By the time we finished dinner, I felt like I'd been analyzed under a microscope. Alex wasn't just interested in me, he was fixated, like he was trying to unravel some secret about me that even I didn't know. After dinner, he suggested we move to the lounge area for another drink. I agreed, figuring the night had been mostly pleasant, even if his intensity was starting to wear on me. We settled into a corner booth, the city lights twinkling behind us, and that's when things took a turn. "You know," he said, leaning closer, "I feel like people don't really get you." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, they see the surface," he said, gesturing vaguely. "The sweet, good girl image. But there's more to you, isn't there? Something deeper." I laughed nervously. "I don't know about that. I think I'm pretty straightforward." "That's what you want people to think," he said, his voice dropping slightly. "But I can tell. There's something underneath. Something untamed." I blinked, unsure how to respond. "Untamed?" He nodded, his eyes gleaming. "You've spent your whole life trying to be good, haven't you? Following the rules, doing what's expected. But deep down, you want to let go. To break free." I shifted uncomfortably, laughing again to mask my unease. "You make me sound like some kind of caged animal." "Not an animal," he said, his tone soft but firm. "Just restrained. You've built walls around yourself, but you don't have to. Not with me." The air between us felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't quite name. I took a sip of my drink, trying to buy time to think. "That's an interesting theory," I said carefully. "It's not a theory," he said, leaning even closer. "I can see it in you, and I want to help you break free. To show you what it feels like to really let go." The words sent a chill down my spine. He said them like a promise, like he'd already decided what I needed before I even had a chance to weigh in. It wasn't just the words, though, it was the way he said them, his voice low and intimate, like he was letting me in on some grand secret. "I think you've got the wrong idea," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "I'm pretty happy with who I am." "Are you?" he asked, his eyes locking onto mine. "Or is that just what you tell yourself?" I set my drink down, my pulse quickening. "Listen, Alex, I appreciate the insight, but I think you're reading too much into this." "I don't think I am," he said, his expression unwavering. "I think you're scared. And that's okay. Change is scary." At that point, I'd had enough. I grabbed my bag, standing up from the booth. "I think I'm going to call it a night." Alex stood too, his movements slow and deliberate. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said, his voice softening. I see so much potential in you." "Thanks," I said tersely. "But I don't need anyone to unlock me or whatever. Have a good night." I turned and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. As I made my way to the elevator, I could feel his eyes on me, heavy and unrelenting. I didn't look back. The text started the next day. "I'm sorry if I came on too strong. I just feel like we connected on a deeper level. I can't stop thinking about you. I know you felt it too. Don't let fear hold you back. You're better than that." I didn't reply, hoping he'd take the hint, but the messages kept coming. When I blocked his number, he found me on Instagram, sending long, rambling DMs about how I was wasting my potential and denying my true self. He even sent me a link to an article about embracing your shadow self, along with a note. "This made me think of you." It was relentless. I blocked him on every platform I could think of, but for weeks, I felt like I was being watched. Every time I walked to my car or stepped into an elevator, I half expected to see him standing there, waiting for me, ready to try again. It's been months now, and the messages have finally stopped. But sometimes, late at night, I think about the way he looked at me, like he saw something in me I didn't even see in myself. And I wonder how many other women he's tried to unlock. and how many of them let him. The coffee shop was cozy and bustling, the scent of roasted beans hanging in the air as I stirred my chai latte absently, waiting for him. His name was Spencer, and he'd been refreshingly straightforward in his Tinder messages, a rare find among the sea of cryptic bios and vague intentions. "I'm looking for something serious," he had written. "I don't play games, and I believe relationships should be built on honesty and communication." It was a sentiment I could get behind. No drama, no guessing games, just two adults being upfront about what they wanted. So when he suggested meeting for coffee to see if we're aligned, I said yes. It was a little formal, sure, but after years of dating app disasters, I figured a little formality might be a good thing. Spencer arrived 5 minutes early, walking in with the kind of confidence that made people turn their heads. He was tall, clean-shaven, and impeccably dressed, pressed slacks, a crisp white shirt, and a leather messenger bag slung over one shoulder. He smiled when he saw me, a quick, calculated expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Emma," he asked, extending a hand as he approached. "That's me," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, almost too firm, like he was trying to make an impression. "Spencer," he said, "it's great to meet you." We sat down, and the conversation started easily enough. He asked thoughtful questions about my work, my hobbies, my goals. He listened intently, nodding at all the right moments, his dark eyes never leaving mine. It was intense, but not unpleasant. He had a way of making me feel like the only person in the room. "So," he said after a while, leaning back in his chair, "what are you looking for in a relationship?" I hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden shift in tone. "I guess, someone who's kind, supportive, and fun to be around," I said. "Someone who has their life together but doesn't take themselves too seriously." Spencer nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's fair," he said. "I think compatibility is everything, which is why I like to be very clear about my expectations from the start." "Of course," I said, though the way he said it made me feel like I was being interviewed. "Great," he said, reaching into his messenger bag. "In that case, I'd like to share something with you." I blinked as he pulled out a neatly bound document and placed it on the table between us. It was thick, at least 20 pages, and printed on high-quality paper. The title at the top read, "Relationship Agreement." "What's this?" I asked, staring at the document. "It's a relationship contract," Spencer said, his tone matter-of-fact. "I've found that being transparent from the start prevents misunderstandings later on. This outlines everything I'm looking for in a partner, as well as what I'm willing to offer in return." I stared at him, unsure if he was joking. He wasn't. "You wrote a contract?" I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief. "Not just wrote," he said, tapping the cover. "I've refined it over the years. It's based on principles of mutual respect, boundaries, and shared goals. I think you'll find it's very comprehensive." I hesitated, glancing down at the contract. Part of me wanted to laugh, but another part, the part that was morbidly curious, reached out and flipped the cover open. The first page was an introduction, written in formal legalese. "This agreement is intended to establish clear expectations and foster a healthy, fulfilling partnership between Spencer, last name, and partner's name." Beneath it was a section titled Terms and Conditions. I skimmed the bulleted list, my stomach tightening with every line. Physical intimacy. Both parties agree to maintain a consistent level of physical affection, including but not limited to hand-holding, kissing, and sexual activity at least 3 times per week. Emotional availability. Both parties agree to communicate openly and honestly about their feelings. Emotional withholding will be considered a breach of contract. Appearance standards. Both parties agree to maintain a presentable appearance at all times, including proper grooming and attire. Sweatpants are acceptable only on Sundays. "What the hell is this?" I asked, looking up at him. "It's a framework," Spencer said calmly, "to ensure we're on the same page. This says I have to have sex with you 3 times a week," I said, pointing to the line. "Only if you're comfortable with it," he said quickly. "But if intimacy is lacking, it's important to address it early. Relationships thrive on consistency." "And this?" I said, flipping to another section. "Social media conduct. Partners must obtain prior approval before posting photos together or tagging each other in posts." "Privacy is important to me," he said. "I've had issues in the past with partners oversharing." I snapped the contract shut, my heart pounding. "Spencer, this is a lot." "I know it's unconventional," he said, leaning forward. But think about it, how many relationships fail because people don't communicate their expectations. This is just a tool to prevent that. It's not a tool, I said, shaking my head. It's controlling. And weird. Spencer's jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. I'm sorry if it seems that way, he said. But I'm serious about finding a partner who values structure and transparency as much as I do. If this isn't for you, I understand. It's not, I said, standing up. Good luck finding someone who signs up for this. I grabbed my bag and walked out, leaving the contract and Spencer behind. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I'd dodged a bullet and could laugh about it with my friends over wine later. But Spencer wasn't done with me. The text started the next day. I'm sorry if I came on too strong. I really think we could be great together. Can we talk? I'd like to explain my intentions better. You seem perfect for this. Please don't let fear hold you back. When I didn't respond, the messages became more pointed. You don't understand what you're missing out on. I've been nothing but respectful. The least you could do is give me a chance. You owe me a proper explanation. I spent hours preparing for our date. I blocked his number, but he found me on social media. He sent me long, rambling messages about how I was rejecting stability and choosing chaos over order. When I blocked him there too, he started emailing me from different addresses. The final straw came when I found a copy of the contract in my mailbox, along with a handwritten note. I still think you'd be perfect. Let me know if you change your mind. I filed a report with the police, changed my number, and made my social media accounts private. For weeks, I jumped every time I saw an unknown number on my phone or a stranger walking too close behind me. Slowly, the messages stopped, and I started to feel like myself again. When Ryan picked me up, I was immediately struck by his energy. He was wearing a perfectly fitted leather jacket, his hair styled just the right amount of messy, and he had this swagger about him that felt magnetic. You look stunning, he said, giving me a once-over. You ready for the best night of your life? I laughed, feeling both flattered and a little skeptical. We'll see about that. He cranked up the music in his car as we drove to the first bar, singing along and cracking jokes the whole way. By the time we arrived, I was starting to think this guy might actually live up to his hype. The first bar was lively but not too crowded, and Ryan was in his element. He ordered us drinks, introduced me to the bartender like they were old friends, and even convinced me to do a round of shots with him. He was loud, confident, and seemed to know everyone in the room. I couldn't help but be drawn to his energy. It was infectious. After a couple of drinks, he leaned in close and said, "This place is great, but I know somewhere better. You up for a little adventure?" I nodded, already feeling the buzz of the alcohol and the excitement of the night. Lead the way. The next stop was a nightclub downtown, the kind of place with neon lights, pounding bass, and a line out the door. Ryan walked right up to the bouncer like he owned the place, clapping him on the back and slipping him a 20. "This one's on me," he said with a wink as we skipped the line and headed inside. The club was chaotic in the best way, dimly lit with strobe lights flashing, the dance floor packed with people moving to the beat. Ryan grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the bar. "What's your poison?" he shouted over the music. "Surprise me," I shouted back, laughing as he ordered us 2 cocktails with names I didn't recognize. We danced, we drank, we laughed. It was the kind of night that felt like it could go on forever. But as the hours passed and the drinks kept coming, Ryan's energy started to shift. He was still loud and confident, but now there was an edge to it, a cockiness that bordered on arrogance. At one point, a guy accidentally bumped into him on the dance floor, spilling a bit of Ryan's drink. It was no big deal. The guy apologized immediately, even offering to buy him a replacement, but Ryan wasn't having it. "Watch where you're going, man," he snapped, his voice sharp. The guy held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Sorry, dude. My bad." But Ryan wasn't letting it go. "You're bad?" "Yeah, it is your bad. Maybe next time, don't be such a clumsy idiot." "Ryan," I said, grabbing his arm. "It's fine. Let it go." But he ignored me, stepping closer to the guy. "You think you can just bump into people and not face any consequences?" he said, his tone dripping with mockery. The guy frowned, clearly starting to lose patience. "Look," I said, I was sorry. "Just chill, okay?" "Chill," Ryan said, his voice rising. "You don't get to tell me to chill." Before I knew it, Ryan was shoving the guy, hard enough to make him stumble back. The guy's friends immediately stepped in, and suddenly there was a full-blown shouting match in the middle of the dance floor. People were staring, the music felt like it was getting louder, and I found myself frozen, unsure of what to do. "Ryan, stop!" I shouted, trying to pull him back, but he shrugged me off. "You want to go?" he said, squaring up to the guy like he was in some kind of action movie. "Let's go." It didn't take long for the bouncers to step in. Two massive men grabbed Ryan by the arms, dragging him away as he continued to shout obscenities at the guy. "You're lucky they're here," he yelled, struggling against their grip. "I would have wiped the floor with you." The bouncers weren't having it. They hauled him outside, and I followed, my heart pounding as I tried to process what was happening. By the time I caught up to them, Ryan was still yelling, his chest heaving as he argued with the bouncers about how he didn't start it and how they were overreacting. That's when the police showed up. It all happened so fast. 1 minute, Ryan was arguing with the bouncers. The next, 2 officers were cuffing him and reading him his rights. "Public disturbance," one of them said when I asked what was going on. He was warned to calm down and refused. I stood there stunned as they led Ryan to the squad car. He didn't even look at me as they put him in the back seat. He was too busy ranting about how this was all bullshit and how he'd done nothing wrong. The bouncers gave me a sympathetic look before heading back inside, leaving me alone on the sidewalk, my head spinning. I couldn't believe this was happening. The guy who'd spent all night trying to impress me was now being driven away in the back of a police car. The next morning, Ryan texted me. "Hey, sorry about last night. That was crazy, huh? Hope it didn't ruin your night." I stared at the message, my anger bubbling to the surface. I couldn't believe how casual he was being, like his arrest was just a minor hiccup in an otherwise great evening. "It definitely ruined my night," I replied. "You were completely out of control. I can't date someone who acts like that." He didn't respond for a while, but when he finally did, his tone was defensive. "Come on, Emma, don't be like that. That guy deserved it. I was just standing up for myself." I blocked his number. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags. Ryan's confidence wasn't just confidence, it was arrogance, the kind of arrogance that didn't know when to back down. He wasn't trying to impress me, he was trying to prove something to himself, and it ended with him in handcuffs. The whole experience was a wake-up call. I realized I didn't need someone who was exciting or fun if it came with that kind of reckless behavior. What I needed was someone calm, steady, and considerate, someone who didn't feel the need to show off or start fights to prove their worth. Dating, they say, is supposed to be an adventure. At best, it's a journey toward connection, laughter, and shared dreams. At worst, it's a series of awkward encounters that you laugh about later. I've had my fair share of both, but a few dates stand out in my memory, not for their charm or romance, but for the sheer absurdity of it all. Take the first woman, for example. Let's call her Sarah. We'd been chatting for a while before we decided to meet up, and our first few dates went well. She was smart, funny, and seemed refreshingly straightforward. But things started to unravel by date 5. It began with what seemed like a small misunderstanding. We'd planned to meet for dinner, and her office was just 5 minutes away from the restaurant. I figured it made sense for us to meet there, especially since she'd been so insistent on keeping things fair, splitting the bill on every date, never letting me pay more than my share. I admired her independence, so I didn't think twice about it. But when I arrived at the restaurant, I could tell something was off. She was already seated, arms crossed, her smile notably absent. "You didn't offer to pick me up," she said, her tone sharp. I blinked, caught off guard. "I thought since it's so close." She cut me off with a dismissive wave. "It's the principle, not the distance." The evening went downhill from there. By the end of the meal, her irritation had simmered into a cold, distant politeness. A few days later, she ended things, her reasoning as baffling as the rest of it. "I need someone who's willing to fight for me," she said, her voice dripping with finality. "You never even tried to insist on paying the bill." I stood there, dumbfounded. Was this a test? Some kind of secret code I was supposed to crack? I never found out. Then there was the woman who, halfway through a pleasant lunch date, dragged me into a high-end boutique. Let's call her Emily. We'd just finished our meal, and I thought things were going well, until she suddenly stopped in front of a Furla store, her eyes lighting up like a kid in a candy shop. Without a word, she walked in, gesturing for me to follow. "Look at this one," she said, holding up a sleek black handbag. "Isn't it gorgeous?" It was. But before I could respond, she added, "You'd look so good carrying this for me." I laughed nervously, unsure if she was joking. Yeah, it's nice. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Well, what? Aren't you going to offer to get it for me? I stared at her, waiting for the punchline that never came. She wasn't joking. Her smile faltered as the silence stretched between us. I don't think that's appropriate, I said carefully. Her expression soured immediately. Without another word, she put the bag back on the shelf and stormed out of the store, leaving me standing there like an idiot. Needless to say, I never heard from her again. But the strangest date of all, the one that still makes me question reality, was with a woman I'll call Kate. We'd agreed to meet for coffee, and things started out normal enough. She was warm, engaging, and had a sharp wit that I found refreshing. But then, out of nowhere, she dropped a bombshell. So let's talk about kinks, she said, her tone casual, as if she were suggesting we discuss our favorite movies. I nearly choked on my coffee. Kinks? I repeated, caught completely off guard. Yeah, she said, leaning in with an eager glint in her eye. I think it's important to be upfront about these things. For example, I like being slapped. I stared at her, unsure if I'd misheard. Slapped? Full force, she clarified. Across the face. My mind scrambled for an appropriate response. Was this a test? Some kind of icebreaker I didn't understand? But she wasn't finished. My dad used to do it, she said matter-of-factly, and I guess it kind of stuck with me. The air left the room. My coffee cup hovered mid-air as I tried to process what she'd just said. Was she being serious? Was this a joke? Or some twisted attempt at vulnerability? I don't think I can relate to that, I managed to say, my voice shaking slightly. She shrugged, completely unbothered. Fair enough. But hey, at least I'm honest. I sat there, stunned, unsure if I was part of some elaborate prank or if this was genuinely her idea of first date conversation. To this day, I still don't know. We matched online, exchanged a few messages, and quickly realized we had a great rapport. He was funny, clever, and refreshingly attentive. He said he lived in a town not far from mine, which made meeting up a breeze. After a couple of phone calls that lasted into the early hours of the morning, I found myself genuinely excited. He seemed normal. When he suggested dinner for our first date, I eagerly agreed. The plan was simple: meet at a cozy little restaurant, have a nice meal, and see if the chemistry we'd built online translated to the real world. I should have known it was too good to be true. The first red flag was waiting for me at the restaurant door. He looked different from his photos, not just a little older or a few pounds heavier, but almost unrecognizable. I'm not one to judge too harshly. Online photos can be deceiving. But this wasn't a case of bad lighting or strategic angles. He looked like he'd aged a decade since the pictures were taken. His nervous smile didn't help, and I felt a flicker of unease. Still, I told myself to stay open-minded. After all, I'd come this far. What was the harm in giving him a chance? I wish I'd turned around and left. We hadn't even ordered drinks before the conversation took a hard left turn into Crazy Town. I like you, he said, leaning forward across the table, his voice low and deliberate. His eyes bore into mine with an intensity that made me instinctively lean back. We should have a baby. I blinked, certain I'd misheard him. I'm sorry, what? You heard me, he said, completely unfazed by my reaction. Are you ovulating? For a second, I thought this had to be a joke, some bizarre attempt at humor gone horribly wrong. But there was no laughter in his expression, no trace of levity. He was deadly serious. I froze, my mind racing. How do you even respond to something like that? I forced a strained laugh, hoping to diffuse the tension. That's not really first date conversation. But he didn't back down. Why not? It's important to be upfront about these things. I felt my stomach twist as a wave of panic set in. This wasn't just awkward, it was alarming. I needed to leave. Fast. I think this isn't going to work out, I said, pushing back my chair and reaching for my bag. Wait, where are you going? He asked, standing up as I did. His tone wasn't angry, but there was an unsettling edge of desperation in his voice. I'm leaving, I said firmly, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. This is too much. I turned and started walking toward the exit, but he followed, his footsteps quickening behind me. My pulse spiked as I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting me like a jolt of adrenaline. What are you doing? I snapped, spinning to face him. Why are you following me? His response made my blood run cold. I don't have anywhere to go, he said simply, as if that explained everything. I lied about where I live. My heart sank. What are you talking about? I don't live nearby, he he admitted, his tone matter of fact. I drove 4 hours to meet you. I figured I could stay with you tonight. The audacity of his words left me momentarily speechless. He'd not only lied about his location, but had somehow convinced himself that I, someone he'd never met in person until tonight, would let him crash at my place. Absolutely not, I said, my voice rising with anger. You need to leave. Now. He tried to argue, but I wasn't having it. I turned and walked away, my every instinct screaming at me to get as far from him as possible. I didn't look back until I was safely in my car, my hands trembling as I locked the doors. The next morning, I woke to a text from an unknown number. My stomach churned as I opened it, already dreading what I'd find. I miss you already, the message read, complete with a winking emoji. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Miss me? You terrified me. I didn't hesitate. I blocked him immediately, deleting the message, as if erasing it could somehow undo the entire nightmare of a date. I was already at the table, stomach growling, and checking the time for what felt like the 100th time. He was late. Not fashionably late, not the kind of late that gives you butterflies while you wait, wondering if this person is as charming in real life as they seemed online. No, this was no regard for basic etiquette late. It was supposed to be a casual lunch, nothing fancy, just a simple meet and greet to see if the spark we had online translated into something real. But as the minutes dragged on, that spark was flickering out. When I finally worked up the nerve to text him and ask for his ETA, his response floored me. I'll be 30 minutes late. Just start eating if you're hungry. No apology. No explanation. Just a casual suggestion to carry on without him. I stared at my phone, trying to decide if I was more annoyed by his lack of effort or by the fact that my hunger was winning this battle. I ordered something small to tide me over and told myself to let it go. First dates are nerve-wracking. Maybe he'd had a rough morning. Maybe he was shy and fumbling. My inner optimist was working overtime to drown out my growing irritation. Finally, more than 30 minutes past his promised arrival, he showed up. At first, I didn't recognize him. The guy who'd been sending me playful texts and witty jokes online was replaced by someone who looked like he'd rolled out of bed and wandered into the wrong restaurant. His hair stuck out in every direction, a literal bird's nest of tangles and neglect. He wore a wrinkled promotional t-shirt from some random event, baggy shorts that screamed laundry day, and a pair of flip-flops that looked like they'd seen better days. No apology. No sheepish grin. Just a chirpy, "Hey," as he plopped into the seat across from me. I blinked at him, momentarily at a loss for words. This wasn't just a casual approach to a casual lunch. This was a complete disregard for the fact that he was on a date. I tried to hide my shock, but I could feel my expression slipping. Did he think this was acceptable? Did he think I'd find this charmingly quirky? As he reached for the menu, my patience snapped. "I'm sorry," I said, forcing a tight smile. "I'm really tired. I think I need to head home." He looked up, confusion flashing across his face, but there was no real concern. No attempt to salvage the date or even to ask if everything was okay. "Oh, okay," he said with a shrug, already turning his attention back to the menu. I stood, grabbed my bag, and walked away, each step feeling lighter as the distance between us grew. The cool air outside was a welcome relief, and as I put more and more space between myself and that disastrous date, the absurdity of the situation began to sink in. How had I even let it get to this point? I'd walked into that restaurant expecting effort, respect, and maybe even a bit of romance. Instead, I'd been met with bedhead and a complete lack of accountability. Once I was far enough away, I pulled out my phone and blocked him. No follow-up messages. No second chances. I wasn't going to waste another second on someone who couldn't even bother to apologize for being late, let alone put in the bare minimum effort to show up looking presentable. As I walked home, I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. I'd thought that someone who wasn't conventionally attractive might try harder, might take the time to impress, knowing they didn't have the luxury of coasting on their looks. But this was a new low. I replayed the scene in my head, from his nonchalant arrival to his oblivious attitude. For a moment, I wondered if I'd overreacted. Was I being too harsh? Too judgmental? But no, this wasn't about appearances. It was about respect, and he hadn't shown any. Not for me, not for the date, not even for himself. When I got home, I kicked off my shoes, sank onto the couch, and let out a deep breath. The frustration I'd felt earlier was already fading, replaced by a strange sense of relief. I'd dodged a bullet. This wasn't a loss, it was a win. I opened my phone, scrolled through my messages, and deleted our entire chat history. As I watched the conversation disappear, I felt a surge of empowerment. One bad date didn't define me, and it certainly didn't mean I had to lower my standards. The lesson was clear: never settle for someone who makes you feel like you're an afterthought. Because if they can't even bother to try on the first date, what hope is there for the future? It's funny now looking back. The absurdity of it all has turned the frustration into something I can laugh about. But at the time, it was a wake-up call, a reminder to value myself and to never let anyone treat me as though I'm not worth the effort. Date 1 went pretty well. We hit it off, she's cute. I ask what book she's reading. She says, I'm reading about the history of Thomas Aquinas. I'm not particularly religious, but I was raised Catholic. We get into a great conversation about the medieval church and its effect on the world. Smart, cute, funny. Definitely a second date. Date 2, after a meal and a drink, she asks, what are your 5-year plans? I think she's joking and say, quoting The Office, I plan to be 5 years sober. No response. The Office, never heard of it. Huh. Okay, what are your 5-year plans? I plan to be married and have at least 2 kids. Huh. Flash to, can you give me a ride home? Sure, I say. But the ride home is well outside of the city to a pretty rural part of my small state. She's giving me directions, and it's getting more and more in the middle of nowhere. We finally turn onto a long driveway that belongs to a large piece of land with a tall fence around it. I drive up slowly. You live here? Oh yeah, I live with a family here. A family? Yeah, I met them through my church. I spot a golf cart driven by a woman with a teenage boy passenger, just coasting back and forth along the perimeter of the property. I don't ask about them. Do you want to come in and see my plants? We had a common interest in gardening. Sure. But before we can go in, a tall, thick man stops us. Turns out he owns the property. He's a state trooper and built this place for his family to prepare for the Y2K bug, when society was supposed to fall apart. IT didn't, but thank God I did, because we got that guy in the White House now, right? Ha ha, yeah. I got a whole armory just in case. Oh wow, okay. The girl leads me into the house and shows me not a few plants, but at least 200 seedlings under grow lights. She enthusiastically points out tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, etc. We could feed dozens of people with these plants. Whoa, this is way more than the casual gardening I talked about. Yeah, well, I take things to extreme. There's a loud, animal shriek behind me. What was that? Oh, that's just James. Do you want to meet him? She leads me to the living room where the windows are blacked out and a projector is showing a muted TV land on the wall in 20 glorious feet. James is over here. I walk over to a bedroom which has a door off its hinges and set on its side, blocking the doorway, from which you can see the TV projection. Inside is the teenage boy I saw on the golf cart earlier. It turns out he's severely retarded, and the only thing that calms him is the television. But he doesn't do well with strange men, so he starts screaming and screaming and screaming as he runs back and forth in his empty bedroom. My date is trying to calm him down and is doing this awkward shrug/smile combo like, kids these days, am I right? I excuse myself, saying I'm clearly upsetting him. I'm almost running to my car. But before I can jump in it, the state trooper stops me and says, I didn't want to say it in front of my date, but I think shit's going to hit the fan pretty soon. When it does, you'll always have a spot here. Great, thanks, bye. My date is at the window. I had a lot of fun. When can I see you next? I'll call you. I did not. I matched with her on Tinder a week ago. Julia. She was the kind of girl who'd turn heads back in high school. A magnetic smile, wild laughter that made you feel like you were the only one in on the joke. We'd never spoken much back then, but when her profile popped up, I couldn't swipe right fast enough. Her message came almost immediately. Dinner at my place next Friday? I make a killer lasagna. I wasn't one to turn down a home-cooked meal, especially not when it came with the possibility of rekindling some teenage fantasies. So there I was, pulling up to her place, an unassuming house in a quiet suburb, armed with a bottle of cheap wine and a half-decent button-up shirt. Butterflies swirled in my stomach as I knocked on the door. When she opened it, she looked even better than her pictures. Casual but alluring, her hair pulled into a loose ponytail, lips painted crimson. Glad you made it, she said, her voice warm, inviting. Come in. The smell of lasagna wafted through the air, mingling with the subtle vanilla scent of her perfume. I stepped into her living room, my eyes darting around. Cozy, clean, filled with personal touches, framed photos, mismatched throw pillows. Then I saw the kid. A tiny human parked on the couch, watching cartoons, completely unfazed by my presence. "Oh, this is Benji," Julia said with a shrug, as if she'd forgotten to mention the small fact of her motherhood. "He's 7. Cool with kids." I stammered out something vaguely agreeable. Kids were fine, I told myself. In small doses. Dinner was surprisingly good. Julia was charming, witty, every bit the girl I'd fantasized about back in school. Benji piped in occasionally, asking questions about my car or whether I could do a backflip. The whole scene was strangely domestic, but there was an energy between Julia and me, an unspoken tension crackling just beneath the surface. As the night wore on and Benji was shuffled off to bed, Julia's demeanor shifted. Her smile lingered longer, her touches grew bolder. "Want to head upstairs?" she asked, her voice a low purr. I followed her without hesitation. Her bedroom was dimly lit, the faint glow of candles casting flickering shadows on the walls. I barely had time to take it in before she was pulling me close, her lips on mine, hands exploring. The world outside faded, reduced to nothing but the heat between us. Then, somewhere in the distance, a sound. A faint, unmistakable noise that sliced through the moment like a knife. The slam of a car door. Julia froze. Her eyes widened, panic flickering across her face. "Shit," she whispered, scrambling to her feet. "He's home." I blinked, my brain sluggish to catch up. "Who's home?" "My husband," she hissed, grabbing at her clothes. "You have to go." "Husband?" The word hit me like a bucket of ice water. Adrenaline surged as I realized the gravity of the situation. "What the hell, Julia?" I whispered harshly, fumbling for my jeans. They were nowhere to be found. "Just get out," she urged, shoving my shirt into my hands. "Window, go." I glanced at the window. 2 stories up, a sheer drop onto what looked like a rosebush-covered lawn. "You can't be serious." Footsteps echoed from downstairs, heavy, deliberate. Julia's panic was contagious now, coursing through me like an electric shock. There wasn't time to argue. Heart pounding, I pushed open the window, cold air hitting my skin like a slap. "Go," she hissed again, shoving me toward the ledge. I swung one leg over, then the other, muttering a stream of curses under my breath. Below me, the yard stretched out like a dark abyss. I had no plan, no dignity, and absolutely no time. I jumped. The landing was less than graceful. Thorns tore at my bare legs as I tumbled into the bushes, biting back a scream. Pain radiated from my shoulder, but there was no time to assess the damage. Somewhere inside, I could hear voices, Julia's husband, confused, demanding answers. "Thought you said you were working late," I heard her say, her voice strained but steady. A masterclass in damage control. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline dulling the pain. Barefoot, shirtless, and in nothing but my boxers, I bolted across the yard. The cold ground stung my feet as I sprinted for the safety of my car, parked a block away. Behind me, a light flicked on. I didn't look back to see if anyone was watching. I didn't want to know. When I finally reached my car, I collapsed into the driver's seat, lungs burning, heart hammering like a drum. My hands shook as I fumbled for the keys, glancing around to make sure no one had followed me. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that feels oppressive, suffocating. I sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. My shoulder throbbed, and I noticed for the first time that my boxers were shredded, tiny red scratches crisscrossing my thighs. What the hell is wrong with people? I muttered to no one. The absurdity of it all hit me then. The lasagna, the kid, the husband, the damn rosebush. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my chest, spilling out before I could stop it. I was half naked, bruised, and bleeding in the middle of suburbia, and all I could do was laugh. The drive home was a blur. By the time I stumbled into my apartment, the adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a dull ache and a bone-deep exhaustion. I collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying the night over and over in my head. The audacity of it, the betrayal, the sheer, chaotic absurdity. Part of me wanted to text Julia, demand answers, call her out on her lies. But what would be the point? She wasn't the girl I thought she was, and I sure as hell wasn't about to be her collateral damage. I dodged a bullet tonight, barely. And as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I made a silent vow. No more Tinder, no more lasagna, and absolutely no more married women.